Learn, experiment, achieve, and take off. We're anthropologists and social scientists who put leaders under the microscope. We are your eyes and ears to dig up the most valuable insights for success to help make you and your business better. We give you the tools to lead your future and help build leaders we all want to look up to. So, rise to your potential. Launch. Welcome. I'm Rebecca Bennett, your host. Afifa Siddiqui has been an entrepreneur all her life. She has successfully founded 3 businesses in recruiting, payroll, and talent management spaces. First, starting Cronos, a recruiting services firm for engineers in Toronto, for which she now sits on the board. Then, expanding into technology with CareerLeaf, a talent management software company, and then starting Canadian Payroll Services, or CPS, the ADP of Canada. I'm bringing Afifa on the show today so we can explore her journey as an entrepreneur, her successes and failures. Afifa is a rare breed of entrepreneur and board member, being a minority female and self-funded. Afifa will be sharing not only how she overcame various startup and personal challenges, but how she was able to pivot from one business to the next and use each one as leverage to build an empire. Welcome, Afifa. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you too.
It's such a great opportunity for our launch listeners to have you on the show today. There's so much for us to talk about, but I want to start with, how did you fall into entrepreneurship?
Well, just like all entrepreneurs, it was quite by accident, coincidental. I stepped into an opportunity and I went with it. So I'll just tell you the story. I actually uh, the first business that I officially launched that was a serious, revenue generating business is a recruiting company called Cronos. And what happened is I am an engineer by training. I was working as an engineer, literally, working on different solutions in the electronics world. And that entire industry one day just completely got outsourced to India and China. So I was actually looking for my next job, and I was interviewing. As every interview I went to, no word of a lie here, I went to 5 back-to-back interviews. Within 10 minutes I knew that this is not for me, but I'll tell you who would be really great for this job. And so I started like that. I was getting my friends and colleagues opportunities in work, and then I'm thinking, whoa, this is something, this is a job. And at that time I didn't really know a lot about recruiting because I'd never really been headhunted well. So, from there, I actually launched a recruiting business, not knowing exactly what recruiting was all about, headhunting in the way that I myself, as let's say, a minority female engineer, would want to be headhunted. And I also picked a very niche specialty, engineering and science, because that's my background. And so that's how Kronos was started. And a lot of what my entrepreneur journey has been about is doing things, solving problems in areas I didn't necessarily have a lot of experience with, but saw lots of problems to solve, and just went with it. With Kronos, that's how we launched, with my need to actually find employment, and then I got employment for lots of other people. Chaos meets order.
Uh, that's really fascinating. Kind of when you started your first business, you almost didn't, I guess, realize that the experience and process you were going through would necessarily lead you to starting that business, but it just, you got it organically from your personal experience, and you started with, yourself and knowing who you are and what you know, and then seeing how that could fit into the world and provide that opportunity for others like you. So that's really fascinating, how your
Yeah.
story started.
And that those are assets too. Like people don't necessarily think of what is an asset that I have. It's my network. It's how I operate. It's who I am. Transparency. All of these, let's call them softer skills. But then how you apply those to then turn it into a revenue stream. And I was about to say that as I started this business having no experience, I went and took a class where I met 2 people who both said to me, "You got to go talk to this guy, Dale." I went to talk to Dale, who literally was a VP at a competing firm, and he ultimately became my business partner and my husband. So
I
I
love that.
I headhunted my partner and husband.
That's the way to do it. A woman who goes after what she wants.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm I'm curious. So you started this new business, Cronos, and I want to dive deeper into what were kind of your startup challenges with it.
Well, at the time, I didn't know a lot about the space, so I had to learn about it. And it turned out to actually be an asset not to know because I did things logically. I didn't have a database. So, and back then, so remember, 20 years ago, there was no big LinkedIn, big, huge databases. It was truly about your network. It was about getting to know people, and then, you would represent them. So I set it up like being a career agent for somebody. And at that time, that was also a new concept. So that headhunting business was literally dealing with the top 5 to 10% of specific industries. I'll give you an example. So alumina smelters, for example, there are, a handful of them across the planet. So if I went and figured out who are the 25 people who could manage $1 billion alumina smelting project, that is my search universe. So again, I'm an engineer. I think like an engineer. I thought about which are the areas where I'm going to develop a practice like this, and this is how I got into all the verticals.
Mhm.
Nuclear energy is a big thing right now for Cronos. We also started renewables before renewables was actually a big thing. Sustainable energy. All of these sort of came out of getting your knowledge base together. So that's like how I think about it. Problem solving for resources, and resources are people.
I like that you mentioned you keep coming back to the point where you're an engineer, and that's engineers think a very specific way, very systematically and logically. One thing causes the next thing. And I like how you use that to your advantage, the way that you thought to set up your business and create that initial database. So you used like a skill that you had and you leveraged it to your advantage, even though recruiting is not necessarily so technical. You use that same mindset though to start your business. So I think that's fantastic, of taking different skills and applying them across different domains.
Yeah, yeah. And as actually, this is what led to my next business and the next business, because in order to organize, so again, legacy, rocket science, recruiting is not, right? But
Uh-huh.
what we did is I actually built our own proprietary applicant tracking system. Now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of ATSs. So you've got big HR tech systems. There's SAP HR. There's PeopleSoft HR. There's this crazy product at the time called Taleo, which is now Oracle. So all of these techs weren't there at the time, at least for a small business. So we built our own. And the logic we applied to building that software actually gave me my technology knowledge.
So take us now into your second business, Afifa, and tell us how that transition happened.
About 10 years ago in recruiting, running Kronos, there's a lot of changes that started happening in the industry. And, as an entrepreneur, I'm always looking at what's next, what can I do? Because businesses are never static. So depending on what's going on in the world, our mining division, for example, was awesome one year. And then the next, there's nothing. So in the recruiting space, it's feast or famine. So what I had run an experiment. I invested in a company called CareerLeaf. I was the lead investor, and I helped fundraise for that company. And when we launched, it was supposed to be an online type of database like LinkedIn, but very specifically for a better candidate experience. They educate the market about job boards, about recruiting, about what's going on in that area. Anyways, that business pivoted, and ultimately the board brought me in to actually lead that company, to change the business model. And I took that on, turned that company into a B2B, selling white label job board software. And right now, we have we have a gentleman I hired to run that business, to take over from myself. So he's running it as a B2B white label, and he actually says if we can find a job board on Antarctica, we'll be on all continents. So it's a good story. and and so that came out of an experiment, and a desire to do to do the next thing, or to expand into what other adventures are coming, and to diversify from the recruiting space. So when things change in the world, one of the first things you'll see is the job markets. What do workers and candidates need to do? How are they looking? Sometimes it's a surplus and a win for the workers, and they have their choice of jobs, and other times not. So right now we're in this space where COVID has created this atmosphere, and it's thrust a whole industry forward while literally killing others. Like the remote workspace right now is thriving, and people and companies in that area are going to do really well, and they're now pushed forward. There's been lots of influencers in that space that have been pushing for people to be able to work from home for decades, and so now it's possible. And so, I'll segue into, my third business, which right now is where I spend the majority of my time, Canadian Payroll Services. It was also an experiment I was doing while diversifying the recruiting business. And it's literally a back office service. We are an employer of record service, primarily for American companies and European companies that do not have a Canadian presence. So in the US, you guys have PEOs. In Canada, PEOs are not as common. A lot has to do with the laws and the compliance of managing employment standards. So it is a Canadian PEO, and we work with literally remote talent. 100% of our workers are remote, and they have been for 6 years. So we've been delivering remote services for all our clients, 100%, and literally we ourselves are also now remote as of 4 months, 6 months. Mm-hmm. So it's that third experiment, and it was clearly the right time and the right thing to be doing, and we're growing, knock on wood, growing like crazy.
Well, that's great to hear. I want to backtrack just for a minute. So you have started these 3 businesses. Can you give our audience a sense of kind of the time span we're looking at between your first and your third business?
So I had started other things in between. These are my successes. So Cronos was started, let's just say 1999, 2000, and there had been a lot of ups and downs. There was literally that first year, there was also a massive recession. So that business, right from the start, we went and started in a really tough time. That first year, literally, I had no revenue. But that grew it up to 15 recruiters. We had some phenomenal years because of how we got into different niches. So to go back to your question that you had asked, the timeline between all the businesses. So 20 years ago was my first business. I had started another company that was a bust, and I learned a lot from it. And so launching Cronos, the specialized recruiting company, I learned that niche and regional. That's how I now think about what I'm going to do. It has to address a niche type market, and then it has to solve a regional problem. The second business, CareerLeaf, like it was let's say 15 years after, when I'm running all these experiments, because I could see that recruiting is changing, and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I wasn't enjoying that every year I have to reinvent ourselves. So I wanted to be in the software space. I wanted to be doing technology and innovating in our industry. And so that was software related. Again, I didn't have any experience in it. I was actually, I had tried to seek out mentorship from very successful CEOs. And one CEO, he actually said to me, Afifa, I would never give you money. I wouldn't give you money because you run a professional service. And from my experience, professional service CEOs don't make good X, like tech CEOs. So I said, and then I just went ahead and built this company anyways. So it was, I was going back, I found my notes and I was like, this is great, because actually I took his feedback very seriously. There's a lot of things he called out that he was completely correct about.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't have a good handle on my numbers because I wasn't sure where I was turning and pivoting.
Mm-hmm.
So his feedback was amazing. And, he helped me reinvent myself for that tech company. So now, Canadian Payroll Services, CPS, it's actually both a professional service as well as tech. So we are building a whole streamlined approach for everything that we do. And it's not that I build everything. I do integrate other people's technology, but my job now is I want to scale well, and I want to, number one has to be the experience that my clients and my workers have. So if I put them first and build around it so that they're seamless, these are the learnings I've now got. So long-winded answer to the first business 20 years ago, then 15 years ago, and then 6 years ago. So it's a continuum of running experiments that when I was running an experiment to figure out the back office service, I had 6 other things going on that failed. So Canadian Payroll Services was the success out of that batch of, let's try different things in the market. I'm not sure if all entrepreneurs do it this way, but again, it's a methodology that, like, even now I'm looking at what else can we do that's going to add value to our clients and our workers. And if I could say this, I think entrepreneurs they're like the first responders of the business space, right? So there's chaos and they run in to solve problems. So this is how I've always kind of thought about entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah. They're the first to the fire because they want to find a solution, a way to put it out. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So now you started these 3 businesses, and so are they currently all kind of wrapped up under one umbrella? Are they separated? Are some no longer here? Yeah.
So Cronos, the recruiting company, is pretty much solely owned by myself and my partner. We have in Canadian Payroll Services, we have 2 other shareholders, and they come out of the business. So I brought on our management team and gave them a piece of it because we all had such pivotal roles, and they believe in what we're doing. Now, CareerLeaf is a little bit of an outlier because it was that experiment. I wanted to get into the tech space, and so I did it very differently. I got funds from friends and family, and I looked at funding that business differently. And it has a whole group of shareholders. So it's separate, but they all are in the similar affiliated spaces. So we do pass leads to each other, but that's mostly because each company has its own purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't actively run CareerLeaf on a day-to-day basis. I've hired a general manager president to do that, and soon he's probably going to take that mantle of CEO as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, these are the 3 companies that are currently in my running bucket. I also see myself one day, sitting on the boards to help direct these companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems like a natural progression. It's interesting, though, the way that you have evolved from business 1 to business 2 to business 3. It was very much, it seems from what you're saying, like it was this incremental progression of just following the trends, following the change or the pivots that were coming along.
Yeah, it's driven by what's happening in the world. Like if I had just stuck with Cronos and recruiting, I'm not sure that we would have grown like this. I think because recruiting has changed so much, and I've changed so much over the years. I might be the same person, but what I can do has matured. How I can do it has matured, and I think those things, it requires some sort of introspection to look at those, like we said earlier, as assets. And now, for example, reaching out to you, this is not something I historically do well. I don't interview a lot. I don't really promote a lot. Everything that I have built, and I'll just speak for myself, I have always had fantastic people around me. So that is a strength, but it's been these people around me. But it's also that to do things that will bring value to the table. So those are, the core pieces, I think.
Hmm. I think it's pretty genius to evolve from one business into the next, and then don't not just completely let go of that first business, but find a way to let that first business help your second business.
Leverage. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
So I say that it's the engineer in me, but it's I think more than that. Before I went to engineering school, I've always been an entrepreneur. Like, I have always had a side gig since I was 13, 14, and I would always even have to hide it from my family because, you know I wasn't allowed to work. You're going to school, you're going to school, you don't do anything else.
Mhm.
And that was also a cultural way of that we grow up. And of course, I always had money in my pocket. They didn't know where it came from. But my first job was, I was telemarketing, and I was selling garbage bags on the phone.
Really
So
fascinating.
I still to this day draw on skills learned from back then. Like, I'll tell you a story, a little trick I used to use. We would have these lists, call these people. So I would see, you know, Margaret Smith. So I'd pick up the phone, and at the time, again, 30 years ago, brown names, colored names, they just, they wouldn't take the call. So I would say, "Oh, hi, Margaret. This is Margaret." So I learned all these little things because, I just needed to sell these garbage bags. So,
Yeah, wow. Yeah, kind of goes back to almost, remember you were talking about trying not to hire people that sound and look like you, but I feel like with customers, they resonate
yeah.
more deeply or with people who are more like them. And I had another friend who's an entrepreneur, and she did a study of small businesses like a mom and pops, where the customer base, they sold more goods and services to customers that were exactly like the owners or the people who were selling them, like the same ethnicity, because
Mm,
they had that some like that natural camaraderie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating, yeah, to see how that plays in.
Well, when, for example, in Cronos, when we built our mining division. So first of all, I don't look like I should be anywhere near a mine. So I would take these meetings to go into these large mining companies, and my partner, he had this great big handsome CEO jaw, right? So we would go into these meetings, and all the questions would be directed to him. And it's kind of interesting to me that I set up all the processes, I've got the structure, and so the answers would come out of me. And so gradually, the clients, they got comfortable that, with my gender, my ethnicity. But these used to be issues. They're not so much, I think, now, but 25 years ago, these were issues. For being a woman, being a colored woman, all of these things at the time seem to factor. I mean, and it's kind of interesting to me. I read just a few months ago. There's a couple of girls that launched a business, and they didn't see a lot of success until they invented themselves a white man CEO. Now, this is now 2020, 2019, they're doing this. And again, they pulled a study out of it about all of these biases, because all of a sudden, they had it is like the Remington Steele effect, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just kind of interesting to think about.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it
But
is.
I don't actually, people ask, doesn't that make you mad? Doesn't it make you bitter? No, it was the time, this is how it was, and you deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's still like that. It's still like any problem comes up, you just deal with it. And that, I think, is also a quality that entrepreneurs have.
Hmm. Yeah, I think resilience would be a good word for entrepreneurs. And yeah, we're born in the time that we're in,
Mm,
and that's something we can't control. And just understanding the environment you're in, and you don't have to be happy or okay with it, but I think settling would not be the answer. But it would be, as long as you're part of a solution to
Yeah,
drive, a force to drive forward a better tomorrow, then that's really what matters.
absolutely.
Because change is not going to happen overnight.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah. And sometimes you think the change has happened and it's
and
actually not
then
happened.
it didn't.
You know, I also, and this honestly has made me a much stronger person and a much stronger leader. I've self-funded pretty much everything that we've done, which is fantastic. And our team, they all feel the same way. Like we even as we build new services, et cetera, we're always thinking, well, do we want to bring in funds from outside? We could. Let's instead build good business models so we don't have to.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing that you've been able to self-fund everything. That's something I would definitely take pride and joy in.
yeah, I'm quite that's the one thing that I'll take some little prideful pat on the
Yeah,
back
there
for.
we go.
But my management team feels the same way. So, and maybe that's just a function of hiring the right people.
Yes. So you started these three businesses. I want to talk a little bit about scaling. What kind of issues did you run into with scaling with either three of them, and how did you solve that?
So, being in the professional services space, meaning delivering a service, um, we it, Kronos was not about monthly recurring revenue at the time. So now we have this jargon around types of revenue. MRR is that the common thing in the tech space. You want that recurring piece of revenue coming in. I speak about revenue because it impacts scaling and choosing what to do so that you can scale and your business can stay alive. When I started Kronos, literally whatever we did had a lifespan. Like, so we started by making placements, and that's just like consulting revenue. You do a deal and it's done. It's like real estate. But if I wanted to build a company that's going to have longevity, I have to build my revenue so that I can pay for my team. And it was really all about, how do I keep my team intact? And I think like this, I think about my people because they're the ones that matter to me. So um, to scale Kronos, the first 5 years, I didn't think about like I was just doing what's called permanent placements. So I was making chunks of revenue and then literally every month having to find new work and new work. Then we jumped into the contractor payroll market, and that was part of the scaling, so that we could have a placement that we make, a deal that we make that is literally giving us residual revenues. And so that was my first sort of foray into scaling a professional service business. And then from that, how do I do this with software? How do I do this with additional services? How do I value add? And so the scaling to me was very much wrapped up with the revenue of a company, so that I can, keep the team intact and then continue to grow. I also think now, and this comes out of running and being in the technology space, scaling the product is the same kind of thinking, but more I have to build efficiencies so that not, you know, again, the people have to have a good experience. That value number one helps me actually build good seamless products that will then generate the scaling effect of both revenue as well as growth for the product or service. So I don't know if that makes sense, but this is how I think about delivering anything that we do, whether it's a service or the use of a product.
Hmm. Yeah, so it seems like the scaling came from not a couple of things. One, managing your cash flow
Yeah,
properly so that you could sustain your team. But then it also seems like you tried to streamline and find those efficiencies. And
yeah.
I want to dive into that streamlining bit just a little bit deeper and just learn about what kind of efficiencies or one, how did you pick which efficiencies mattered the most? Like, why did you choose to work on those specific ones and streamline them? And then how did you go about doing it?
So I put the customer first, and now people, there's a term now, customer experience, client experience, CX. So you've got all these new industries that have come out of some of this thinking. If I put my customer first, what would it take to keep them long term, to give them that good experience, and that basically spelled out, here's what I should work on. And that meant that, I want to make sure they have a very efficient, we were talking about recruiting, but it could be anything. It could be, any manufacturing company. How do I put my customer first and give them a solid, streamlined experience? So that means they have to deal with me, very quickly, expertly, and professionally. So these things matter. And I'm sure you hear this all the time from business leaders, because a customer will find somebody else if they have a better experience elsewhere. And it's not always about the cost of your service. It's about the experience and the feel. I've always felt that way. We're not the cheapest service. We are not. What we are, though, and we consistently get this feedback, is that we deliver a service well, and we also never say that we don't make mistakes. What I say to my team, and my team says to our clients, is if and when we make a mistake, we will get ahead of it and we will solve it together to your advantage. And I think that's what it takes to succeed in any business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, finding your second and third business were about
Yeah.
experiments, and you talked about you had so many failures in between, and that's how you were able to rise above it. And then taking that mindset you already had, it was part of your nature, and you applied that with your team and helped them to think that way and put them in that environment, I think is really, really powerful. I want to step back away from your successful businesses just for a second and talk about some of those harder to talk about failed businesses. Maybe pick maybe one or two ideas that maybe were the harder lessons learned that you feel that other entrepreneurs might have experienced as well and can learn from yours.
Around the time I started Cronos, I had another experiment, and I even had the site, and I actually liked this business better than Cronos Consulting Group. So it was called Wasabi. Wasabi was a pure business development play, and it was a very, very simple, it started it with a one-page site, and literally, to me, it was so clean and crisp. It was just communicated a message: engage customers with emotion. That's what Wasabi was supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
And literally, I did it because it was also a way to, remember I said I was looking for my next thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I did this partly I don't want to answer job ads. I wasn't getting anywhere. I was giving other people opportunities. So what am I great at? I'm good at developing business. So, I set up Wasabi, and as I was promoting it, to me, that's kind of like, getting interviews to help other companies solve their problems, which is building their business. And so, it kind of turned into lead generation for Kronos.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But on its own, it was like a flop.
Uh-huh.
I got hired a few times, but again, I also am a very diverse thinker. I like to have, a lot of different things to juggle. And, I just wasn't good at dealing with, here's my business. I need to sell this many widgets. I wasn't good at that.
Yeah.
So that was one big failure, but I love the name and I kept the domain. So I've got that.
I love the name too. That's such a great name.
Yeah, it's hard to find good domains. Another thing, when I was working on a part of CareerLeaf, I actually got a pilot to a pilot program with the Toronto District School Board. So basically any school board. And I had this thought that how do you teach kids, how do you teach young people how to get their first jobs? Basically, how do you get internships? So I do have this is not really a failure, but it's just that I've had this in mind and started it a few times, fits and starts. I have a domain called Youth at Work. So Youth at Work is about helping young people understand how jobs, getting jobs, keeping jobs, getting experience, developing your career, how all that works. So, it didn't go too far because, again, you need time and energy, and there's so many changes literally happening every 6 months. In this past decade, I just feel like we're swamped with change.
It is the decade of change. That's definitely happening.
Yeah. I have another initiative, if you want to know. We actually have, and it is an affiliated company. It's called Work the North, and it is actually a job board, a hybrid job board recruiter for remote workers. So, it's actually out there, workthenorth.com. But right now, again, it's in process. So this is another great example of an experiment, that I run all of these initiatives, and they're all kind of related because they're there to help. And that site is there to help remote workers find jobs. I don't actually, right now, I offer free ads, because the idea is really to get people back to work. It's right now not necessarily about the profit of it. It's about getting help to people who don't know how to work remotely. So, that's what that initiative is.
Okay, when you said Work the North, I was thinking, her plans to dominate the world and be across 7 continents.
Yeah, I'd have to relocate it to Antarctica.
I don't know, is there work in Antarctica? I have no idea.
Oh no, they have probably one post for their, wildlife biologists.
Exactly. Well, Afifa, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And if our listeners wanted to learn more about what you're working on or wanted to be in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to connect?
I'm always open to a LinkedIn invitation, and email is great. Afifa at CanadianPayrollServices.com would be fine.
Well, thank you, Afifa, so much for sharing all of your insights on your leading through uncertain times and your journey as an entrepreneur, leading 3 successful businesses. It's been truly inspirational and a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and likewise.
Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to download the next episode so you can listen to it on your next commute or trip. You can access more great insights and other goodies on our website at launchitspot.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there, which will notify you when we post the new goods. And of course, we always appreciate shares and likes by our listeners. Did you know that you can be featured on Launch? We are always looking for interesting people who are striving to become better leaders, as well as subject matter experts in any of our content categories listed in our nav bar. Believe it or not, your story can inspire so many people. All you have to do is quickly apply on our website and we'll be in touch. Now, how are you going to lead the world?